Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be talking about lemonade and beer, although not in the same story, Social Security, red light cameras and speed cameras, and the downsizer dispatch. All that and more coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
And welcome to episode 124 of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. With you, as always, is Toby.
And Nick.
We have a whole lot we want to talk about today, going around from stories from all around the country, having to do with government and where it's overstepped its bounds, grown too big, and is causing more harm than good. Now, there are a myriad of these stories, but today I want us to start off with a subject we've talked about quite a few times on this show, having to do with speed cameras and red light cameras. Yes, we've talked about how studies have shown that red light cameras especially are much more dangerous than having none at all, because they're set up in ways where people try to slam their brakes on instead of run a yellow light, which would be safer, and they cause more collisions. Studies have shown that these cameras oftentimes are more dangerous, cause more accidents and more deaths than getting rid of them altogether. With speed cameras, what we've pointed out are they're not for stopping people from speeding. If they wanted to do that, it would be very, very easy. They just put up speed cameras everywhere and people would quit speeding. Instead, they're for revenue. That's why they move them around. They don't have them everywhere because if, well, there was a speed camera everywhere you went, nobody would speed. Everyone would go the speed limit, but that's not what they're for. They're for revenue. So that brings us to why we're talking about them on this show, Nick, which is having to do with revenue. Governments from all around the world and all around the country are really struggling when it comes to generating enough money for their governmental business.
Well, to take enough money from people who actually work for it to carry out the goings-on of government, because government doesn't actually, well, I shouldn't say they don't create the money. They don't create things of value, but government can print money. That's essentially another form of taxation. But ultimately, the government ends up taking the wealth that it uses to run government operations from the taxpayers or the people it confiscates that wealth from.
Right, and right now, an easy way to generate money is putting up these speed cameras. You're catching every single speeder that goes by. A lot of time, they're not discriminating against people who are going 5 miles an hour over 10 miles an hour. That just has to do with the fine. So everyone who's going by who's speeding, which is almost every car, at least initially when you put up the speed cameras, will be caught and they'll have a ticket delivered in the mail. The government actually doesn't even need to do much. They privately contract these companies out, and so a private company comes in, sets up the speed camera. All the government has to do is collect a check. So it works out great in their favor. They're collecting a ton of revenue. And I just wanted to throw up a graphic to show which states around the nation in the United States have cameras. Now, what you're seeing on the red graphic, the graphic on the screen, red stands for states with red light cameras only. Blue is for states with red light cameras and speed cameras. Gray, which is just Massachusetts, has speed cameras only, and the white ones are states that have not yet had any speed or red light cameras put into place so far. But they are having legislation going through in almost all these states to at least think about putting in either speed cameras, red light cameras, or both. And as we've said, it can be much more dangerous to put in the red light cameras. The speed cameras, well, they are really only for revenue purposes.
I think it was a story reported on out of the United Kingdom, I believe it was the United Kingdom, where they started taking these speed cameras down, some of them, because there were too many speed cameras in this one given area in the UK.
Everyone
and
people
weren't speeding. Well, the government's reaction was to take the cameras down, which illustrates that they're doing this to generate tickets, to generate revenue. They're not doing it to make everyone safe, because if they were, they would put the cameras up everywhere. And they'll say that they're doing it to help keep people safe, but the real motivation behind it is that they get money out of it.
They move them around when one section of the road, they've said, oh, people have quit speeding here, so we'll move along and we'll take that one down. We'll put it up where people aren't suspecting. They also have mobile speed vans that just simply drive around taking pictures without pulling you over, just mailing the tickets to you. And while it's interesting that all these states are putting up speed cameras and red light cameras in the same week that we're talking about this, camera attacks have taken place in Tennessee, Australia, Italy, Latvia, Spain, and the UK have all had cameras attacked by angry people who want them rid of. Some people have set them on fire, some people have rammed their cars into them, and some people have bashed them up with baseball bats, all this week alone. So every single day there are people attacking these speed cameras because people are quite upset And for good reason in a lot of cases. We've reported on stories where, for example, they'll change the yellow light. Some days it'll go for 3 seconds, some days for 2 seconds, so people can't really tell how long they have. Some places where if you roll across the stop line, which you need to do to see if it's safe to turn on red, we'll mail you a ticket for that. So there's a lot of these systems are really insidious and just made to make money, which has some people upset for some pretty good reasons. Now, I'm not saying people should go out there and bash the cameras.
I can't blame people if
but
they're
you can't
angry
really
about
blame them for it because, I mean, look at what the governments around the world are doing.
Yeah, and it's not just speed cameras or red light cameras. That's how it starts. But once you start seeing government implement cameras for generating revenue from speeders and for stoplight violations, you tend to start to see it fan out, and they'll start putting cameras up on main streets, and then they'll put cameras in more and more places, which is how this happened in the United Kingdom. It didn't all of a sudden sprout up overnight that they had 20 million closed-circuit television cameras around that country, but the government started phasing it in certain areas and for certain reasons that they would cite. And if Americans don't stand up to this, we're going to probably see just as much of a surveillance state as they do in the UK.
Right. And, you know, it should be pointed out that, as you said, some of these cameras can easily be turned into high-definition cameras that can recognize license plates, scan every license plate that goes through. If the vehicle's not registered properly or there's a warrant out for the arrest, the dispatch will be released immediately. So
yeah, the
there's
license
a lot
plate
of
readers are being released as well.
And you don't need brand new cameras for that. You can implement them with new software to use some of the older cameras. So there's a lot of Big Brother implications for this. So if you are living somewhere already that doesn't have these cameras, it's important that you stand up when these bills come to Congress and or to the elected officials that are going to be voting on them, because it's an easy way to make money. The officials are going to be voting for these, and that's what we're seeing. It's an easy way to generate a lot of revenue very easily. It doesn't keep people safe, but it's a great way to generate revenue. So elected officials are all about these. So it's very important that the people stand up and say no. And in some places, taking them down even. It would be very nice to get rid of the ones that are already up. But we do need to move on because there are other stories that we need to talk about. This one coming from Wisconsin, Kenosha, Wisconsin, in fact, where a public official is trying to pass some legislation in the town of Kenosha to make swearing at firemen and police officers a crime. Yes, a crime that would be punishable by a fine of, I think it's $118 fine for the first offense for swearing at a police officer or a fireman. Even though Kenosha already has a law banning profane, vile, filthy, or obscene language, Patrick Julia, one of the city bureaucrats, wants to make it so that it's easy for policemen or firemen to simply write you up a citation if you swear at them. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, it's not polite to swear at police officers or firemen. You shouldn't do it. But come on. Home of the free, land of the brave. I think I said that backwards. Land of the free, home of the brave. Come on. This is America, people. Freedom of speech, First Amendment. Is anybody being hurt? Is there a victim in these cases? Yeah, I guess if you're really belittling someone, but that's a different story. There's already laws on the books for that. Do we really need to be implementing these laws? How much freedom do we really have if you can't swear at a policeman when you're frustrated? I don't advise doing it. It's a very bad idea. He'll probably be more likely to write you a ticket for speeding or running a stop sign or something else. It's probably not a good idea. Should it be against the law, Nick?
No, I don't think it should, and I'm betting they're not going to enforce this regulation when it comes to firemen swearing at policemen, or policemen swearing at firemen, or policemen swearing at other policemen. Somehow I don't think they're
going to...
What about
policemen swearing at members of the public? I've been sworn at by cops before, right here in the good old Keene, New Hampshire, where the police you're supposed to be your friends. They've sworn at me. They said, I don't care about your town. I just moved here. This is a piece of bleep town. Should I have gotten $118 from him? At least this isn't going on in Keene. It's going on in Kenosha, Wisconsin. But, you know, these things like to spread out. And it's a great way to get more revenue because, I mean, it's very simple. There's not much involved here. You swear at a cop. It's their word against yours. They write you a ticket, and you've got to pay it. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I guess you could challenge it, the constitutionality of it. That'll cost years of your life and hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably.
Yeah, it would take quite a bit to run it as high as you would need to. At least the state Supreme Court, I would think.
Yeah, anyways, if this comes to your town, fight it. And hopefully people in Kenosha, Wisconsin, I don't know how many viewers we have there, but hopefully they'll stand up and say enough is enough. Come on, we already have laws against profane, vile, filthy, or obscene language. I don't know how they what exactly that means, what's vile language. It seems rather subjective. But they already have laws against that. Do we really need more? I don't think so. Anyways, you can give your opinion. fmtv@freemindstv.com is the email address, or you can log on to our website, freemindstv.com, and there's ways to contact us from there. Let us know what you think, because we value your opinions as well. All right, let's move right along, Nick. It is that time where we allow people to at least let their voices be heard with those elected representatives with the Downsizer Dispatch. What do we have on tap this week, Nick?
Well, this week the Downsizer Dispatch is focusing on one of the proposals that has come out of Downsize DC, and that is H.R. 500, which is the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007. And what it would do is it would force Congress, if it was enacted, to take a pay cut every year that the federal government runs a deficit. And the federal government runs a deficit, well, pretty much every year. In fact, it does run a deficit every year. And it has been sponsored by a number of representatives in the House. And it's the kind of responsibility matter that might actually get some traction. It's a good idea. They're probably going to play around if it actually gets enacted or amended. If it actually gets to the floor, they'll probably try to play around and make it subjective by how much their pay gets cut. Maybe they'll only cut it by $1. $100, $1,000. They make some pretty good money. I think it's six figures a year.
And they've been giving themselves pay raises. I always find it funny how Congress...
they get a pay raise.
They voted it in, so they get one like every year.
They voted it in, so it's automatic now.
Right.
It used to be Congress actually had to debate and then give themselves a pay raise. But
do I deserve more money? Let's see. Do I?
Well, that got a lot of criticism because they were running federal deficits quite frequently, and people, whether they want smaller government or not, most people are usually frustrated with Congress.
They're rich enough. I mean, their approval ratings right now, I think, is 18% of the American public approves of what Congress is doing. I know when previous to the election it was 9%, but a whopping 18% of them agree. The American public now agree with what Congress is doing. So the majority of people not so pleased with Congress. So yeah, it would annoy people if they're constantly every single year voting themselves pay raises. So you're right, Nick. What they did is made it very simple. They don't have to debate it every year. They just debated it one year, and now it's automatic.
Yeah, I mean, so and that's backwards. I mean, they really shouldn't be giving themselves pay raises, even if they have to vote for it.
Don't they get enough money from their lobbyists? They've got. I mean,
they make a lot of money from
that's where
outside
the majority
the system,
of their money comes
speaking
from.
engagements, things like that. So if you agree with us, go to downsizedc.org and send a letter to your officials in Washington. Let them know that you want them to co-sponsor H.R. 500.
You know, it'd be real nice. I think they should still be volunteers in Washington, Nick. I like how we have it worked out here in New Hampshire, where at least the House of Representatives, there's 400 of them, is it? Anyways,
435, I think.
They're volunteer. They get paid
$100
$100 a year, which is nice. I mean, that means they're actually volunteer. It's not something that they're being paid to do. So you're not having people go in to make money for it. So at least I think it's a little bit of a better system to have volunteers do it rather than paying them six figures to go and screw up all of our lives.
You don't have as many career politicians, and part of that is also because New Hampshire is such a low population state with such a big state legislature that you really aren't going to hold very much influence. So it's really not worth a lobbyist's time to go and try to sway a New Hampshire state representative because they represent a few thousand people.
Right.
So it just makes more sense for them to go to Washington to lobby for regulations where one representative represents hundreds of thousands of people.
Right. Anyways, they are fools in Washington, but still let them know what you think. And there's a lot of other great issues at downsizedc.org as well. All right, when we come back, we're going to be talking about lemonade and beer, two different stories, and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. This is Free Minds TV.
Hi, I'm Ian Freeman from Free Talk Live and FreeKeen.com, and you're watching Free Minds TV.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. It is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Log on to our website, freemindstv.com. From there, there's the radio side, blogs, the archives, the member side, only $3 a month or $30 a year. It holds tons of bonus material. So if you've used up all the free archives, well, this is our 124th episode, plus tons and tons of bonus videos, bonus audio, radio shows, and blogs and all that stuff on the members side at freemindstv.com. All right, moving right along, we are going to be getting into lemonade and beer stories, but first I wanted to go into some Social Security news and Social Security numbers. Now, originally these were not for identification purposes. I know that a lot has changed since then. What's the Social Security news story about? I haven't even seen it, Nick.
Well, I got this from myfox.com, and it's a story coming from Holly Raymer. And he's saying when Tropical Storm Chada'an struck the Federated States of Micronesia in 2002, the U.S. government sent 1,300 blankets, 4,000 disposable diapers, 30 cases of sardines, and my Social Security number. What he's pointing out here is that the 9 digits that are supposed to be tied to each and every individual American can also identify people from the Federated States of Micronesia, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and the Republic of Palau, because these 3 countries are sort of independent countries. I guess you would call them free states in association is the official title, but they have their own independent Social Security administrations. However, they get a lot of U.S. aid for things like disaster relief, small business loans. So they get a lot of loans from U.S. government agencies because these 3 countries essentially trade away part of their sovereignty. They trade away their own right and duty to military defense, and the U.S. treats these areas as protectorates. But in exchange, the U.S. gives them all kinds of aid. Basically, we give them a little bit of money, and we get to park aircraft carriers in the water and things like that. So it's shocking that these countries don't actually have a separate system that actually has different numbers. And if you live in New Hampshire or Maine, where a lot of our viewers do, you should know that sometimes these countries are creating Social Security numbers for their own people with digits that begin with a 00. So that's the same as New Hampshire and Maine.
That's what mine is.
Yep.
Oh.
And
so that's everybody in New Hampshire and Maine has a 00?
I believe so, yeah. It's based on where you're born.
But Nick, shouldn't none of this matter because Social Security numbers aren't even supposed to be used for identification purposes? So this should be a moot point anyways. I mean, if someone gets my Social Security number, it shouldn't be a big deal because it's meant for Social Security purposes only. When I retire or I'm disabled,
well, that's the way it should
I'd be collecting what I paid in and my employer paid in. So this should be a moot point. It shouldn't really matter. I mean, yes, there could be a little bit of confusion, but nothing that couldn't be fixed immediately. It shouldn't be hurting my credit rating, or people shouldn't be able to take things out in my name because Social Security numbers are not supposed to be used for identification purposes.
Yeah, but unfortunately it doesn't work that way. See, when the USDA or FEMA, whatever U.S. government agency, gives a loan to somebody in Palau or Micronesia, and that person defaults on the loan, then essentially that debt is submitted to debt collection agencies. And it's attached to that person in Micronesia or Palau's Social Security number that was issued by Palau or Micronesia. But it can be the same number that was issued for a U.S. citizen. So when these numbers are given to debt collection agencies, they tend to go after the person, the American citizen, with the Social Security number that matches what they've been given. They just sort of assume that, all right, well, this is a Social Security number. It's got the same number of digits as a U.S. Social Security number, so that's where they're going to look. Most people, most debt collection agencies are not going to go, was this number created in the Federated States of Micronesia? And this has hit close to home, actually. Jeff Whitcomb of Keene, New Hampshire, for this story.
That's where we broadcast from.
That is where we broadcast from. Said he had no idea that public record databases show a Social Security number linked to someone in Micronesia, but he wasn't overly alarmed. As far as he knows, he hasn't been harmed by the connection. It seems to me it's likely an innocent mistake, but one that bears watching. And he said, it makes me want to most definitely do business with a small local financial institution that knows me and not just my Social Security number. And I personally think it's a problem that every financial transaction you do, whether it's your credit score, paying your taxes, everything.
Blockbuster membership, for crying out loud.
Everything is tied to a Social Security number. And when the program first started, people were promised.
It was right on the card. It said not for identification purposes.
It was only for Social Security purposes. It was only so they could identify what benefits you get from Social Security. But now it's a number that's essentially used to track every single American. It's your identifier number, like if you were in prison.
Yeah, tattoo it right on your arm. Anyways, that's only the tip of the iceberg for what's wrong with Social Security. And I mean, we could do an entire show about all the problems with Social Security, but we don't have all that much time, so we should move along. That's a topic for another day. Social Security system completely fraud. It's not just the numbers that are backwards. It's the whole system in general. It's about to collapse.
It's broke, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in the future. But I think most people
As
who
it
are
begins to crumble.
most people people who are right near retirement age are probably thinking about it, and people who are young and just entering the workforce are probably thinking about it. There's a spot in the middle there where I don't think people focus on it too much, but young people they're getting screwed essentially.
Well,
They're being
it's
forced-
obvious that they're not ever going to get the money that's paid
Right.
in. It's not just 7.5%. It's a full 15% because your employer matches what you put into. So you really could be taking home 15% more of your paycheck every week and investing it yourself if the government wasn't skimming it off to pay for, well, the baby boomers retiring now and whatever else they want to spend it on, because they pretty much lump it all together. It's not put in an account or a lockbox, if you will, for you for later. You're never going to see it. I'm never going to see my Social Security money. So essentially just being robbed. Imagine how well I could retire, though, if I had 15% of every paycheck to invest in something else myself. Instead, I'll get nothing. All right, though. I said we wouldn't talk about that too much. Let's move right along, Nick. Last week we were talking about how deli meats were horrible for you. They'll cause bowel cancer. That was depressing. So I wanted to bring some good news, at least, about a product that has previously been poo-pooed on by health officials around the world. It's very bad for you. In moderation, it's okay, but it's very bad for you to drink. We're talking about beer here. And I wanted to bring you some good news because there's so much bad news coming about what we're putting into our bodies. It's time for a little bit of good news. And this story is coming out of Spain, where researchers have found that women drinking beer, either a pint a day or more, can help protect their bones and avoid getting osteoporosis. Yes, it is found that silicon is found in beer. It's actually the best place you can get silicon in a Western diet, in your average diet, is from beer. And it helps promote healthy, strong bones. It's also found that phytoestrogens are also found in beer, which is the plant version of estrogen, which really helps keep bones healthy, especially in women. And so, well, maybe drink a little bit. It's not so bad for you. In moderation, of course. But I thought it was important to bring a little bit of good news about the stuff that people are always ingesting into them, because we're told everything's going to kill us, we're going to get cancer, we're going to die by the time the story's over. Might as well bring the good news as well. This study was done on 1,700 healthy women, aged 48 was the average age, and then they tested the hands and put the bones under. Let's see. They took a look at the bones.
They X-rayed them.
They X-rayed the bones and they
did an MRI.
They found that the beer drinkers had stronger bones, less osteoporosis.
Yeah, I mean, and it's
Moderation,
true.
though, is the key.
Usually we hear about stuff being bad for us. Usually we don't hear about stuff that's a mixed bag, and that's what most things are. If you drink too much beer, that's probably going to cause health problems. But if you drink a little bit of beer, you might be better off. If you eat way too much red meat, that could cause a whole host of health problems, but some red meat in the diet is arguably pretty healthy for you. So, you just don't get a very balanced picture when you hear these articles about health and wellness, because they're trying to scare you, and it seems like they just try to make you feel bad about yourself, so you go out and buy products that are designed to make you feel more healthy, like vitamins or supplements or, organic, healthy food that's not necessarily so healthy, but it's marked up considerably because people feel better purchasing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, moderation is the key. It's always important to see who's funding the studies. And I don't have this. It could be Anheuser-Busch for all I know. But the point is, there's always a silver lining in every cloud. And don't be scared by all the scare tactics. Eat your deli meats, and an occasional beer isn't going to kill you. So.
Or don't eat them. I don't have a problem with people not doing that. I just have a problem when
deli meats are delicious.
They are delicious.
You'll have to watch last week's show to hear what we're talking about.
If people, if people want to miss out on that stuff, more power to them. I just have a problem when people try to tell you how to live healthy, and they're focusing on everything that's negative about everything, whether it's food or whether it's drink or whether it's your level of physical activity. And the fact of the matter is, if you're doing things in moderation, you're not eating so much that you're gaining way more weight than you should, and you're somewhat physically active, you're probably doing fine. And something will kill you. You're going to be dead someday, so don't worry about it too much.
Life, it's a killer. All right, moving right along, we've got one more story to get to, and this is probably the last time we'll bring you one of this kind. We've been talking about it a few different times. In fact, last week's show we talked about it. lemonade stands being busted by the government, keeping us safe from those children trying to peddle us that illegal substance, or at least illegal without the proper business license and paperwork, paying the government their money. Let's move on, Nick. You've got the latest lemonade bust.
Yep, and this one is coming from New York. And apparently 3 Parks Department agents put a squeeze on a 10-year-old girl in Riverside Park, New York, slapping her with a 50...
They put the squeeze
They put the
on her.
squeeze. Did you catch that? I never know how to read writing like that. And they slapped her with a $50 ticket for selling lemonade without a permit. Now, granted, the way I'm reading this, she was actually on park land, but they're not claiming that there was some reason she couldn't do it on parkland. She just didn't have the permit. And I guess her and her father were selling ice-cold lemonade for 50 cents each. So they've been slapped with a $50 fine. They'd only have to sell 100 glasses of lemonade to make up for that.
Good for them. Good for the government keeping us safe from those children trying to peddle us lemonade without a license, because it could kill you, Nick.
Yeah.
If they pay the government and fill out the proper paperwork, their lemonade would be perfectly safe. But without the proper paperwork, without filling out those that business license and actually paying the thousands and thousands of dollars it would take to sell lemonade legally, we could all be dying. So thank you so much to the fine officials, the good police work in New York City. I know that if I ever walk down the street, I'm going to be safe because they're keeping me safe from those little kids selling that tainted lemonade. Well, it's not necessarily tainted, but they didn't fill out the right paperwork. And if you don't fill out the right paperwork, you're not good at making lemonade, right? Is that how it works?
I guess that's the argument. The government doesn't get its money, and so they're very upset. And apparently, the father here is saying...
Is there a correlation? Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a correlation between filling out paperwork and making a delicious cup of lemonade?
Not that I'm
There
aware
must be, because officials around the country seem to think if you're able to fill out the government paperwork and jump through these hoops, you'll be much better at cooking and squeezing fresh lemons and doing everything business related. If you can jump through their hoops. So is there some kind of a study that the government officials know about that I don't, that says if you can fill out this paperwork the right way and you can pay us the money that we want, you'll be really good at whatever your business is, selling lemonade, cooking food, whatever it is? That you know of? Am I just in the dark here?
I doubt there's a study, but they seem to be under the impression that there is.
Okay.
And I just wanted to point out here that the father in this case was saying that the parks officials were very hostile as soon as they approached and kept asking, "Where's your permit? Where's your permit?" So apparently that's all they cared about. They were, "How's it going? You guys selling
They
anything
didn't even
today?"
buy some lemonade?
Well, they wouldn't buy lemonade from somebody who wasn't licensed.
Is it illegal for me to buy lemonade from someone who's unlicensed?
I
Can
don't
get
think
fined
so.
as well?
I don't think so. I mean, it would.
All right.
I doubt it.
So
I
don't
doubt
have
it
to
works
worry
that
if
way.
I want to.
I can't speak to every city.
sell
I mean, I'm sure
lemonade.
there's somewhere where they have some rule against that, but usually it's only the vendor who gets gone after if they don't have a permit.
Well, at least we live in America, Nick, where we still have our freedoms. We're still free people, the freest country in the world, right?
You just need a permit to sell lemonade.
Right. Very depressing. Anyways, that'll do it for us. We are out of time. FreeMindsTV.com is the place to go for ways to help the show. You know what we could use right now? Some nice reviews on iTunes, or maybe go to our website and hit the Stumble thumbs up sign. Any of that social networking stuff would really help out the show. I mean, we're on iTunes in addition to doing the television show. We do a radio show as well. 3 to 5 p.m. on Sundays is when it is live. But you can also download it as a podcast. So maybe voting for us on Podcast Alley, leaving us a positive review on iTunes, giving us a thumbs up on Stumble, any of that stuff, all at FreeMindsTV.com for the latest, would really help us out. Or you can always donate us some money, $1 or $2. You've been watching the show, you like it, you think it's worth $1, you can do that at our website as well. Anyways, it has been Toby here with you.
And Nick?
Let's tune in next week. We'll have a brand new episode, FreeMindsTV.com. In the meantime.
There she is.